You are listening to Sales Optex. Visit us at salesoptex.com.
So the day your company announces it's being acquired,
Yeah.
the C-suite, they invariably pop the champagne.
Oh, yeah. Every time.
Right. The press release goes out over the wire. The stock price usually gets this nice little bump. And the executives stand on a stage with this flashy, highly aspirational presentation deck.
Mm-hmm.
And they point to these beautifully formatted slides and promise the market, unprecedented cross-sell synergies, complementary customer bases, and a best-of-breed platform that will just revolutionize the industry.
Right. It's always presented as this perfectly engineered binary event, like company A plus company B equals unstoppable market dominance.
Exactly. Unstoppable. But statistically speaking, in the very next quarter following that champagne toast, your sales are going to drop by 8%.
Yeah, 8% just gone.
And behind the scenes, you were about to enter a 12-month legal purgatory where, honestly, simply talking to your new coworkers could literally trigger a federal investigation.
I mean, the disconnect between that pristine boardroom narrative and the granular operational reality is just staggering.
It really is.
Like, when you look at the research, particularly the McKinsey integration perspectives we're pulling from today, you see a total graveyard of failed promises.
A graveyard. Wow.
Yeah. Between 66 and 75% of traditional integration approaches fail to deliver the promised value.
Wait, up to 75%? That is massive.
It is. And they don't fail because the strategic vision was necessarily wrong. They fail because the people running the revenue engine get bogged down in risk avoidance.
Right.
Or they're forced to rely on these rigid corporate templates that have absolutely no connection to how their specific go-to-market motion actually functions.
Which is exactly why we are tearing down those corporate M&A buzzwords today.
Absolutely.
If you are a sales operations professional who's currently bracing for impact, or a revenue leader trying to figure out how to navigate the absolute chaos of a newly announced deal, this deep dive is your survival guide.
Yeah, because we are pulling from a massive stack of M&A playbooks, systems integration frameworks, and some really candid inside looks at what happens when two massive sales organizations are forced to collide.
Because merging two sales teams is not a corporate marriage. It is much more like trying to swap out the engine of a commercial airliner while it's currently cruising at 30,000 feet.
That is the perfect analogy.
Right. Like the passengers, meaning your customers, they cannot know that anything is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
But the mechanics in the background are violently fighting over which fuel line to use.
Exactly. Who gets to hold the wrench and whose engineering schematic is actually correct.
Yes. And while those mechanics are fighting, the plane is losing altitude.
Which is exactly where that 8% sales decline comes from.
Right. So when we look at how a revenue leader actually beats those odds, we have to start at the absolute beginning of the timeline.
Mm-hmm. Day zero.
The deal is announced. The emails hit the inboxes. But before any systems can actually be merged or any teams combined, the organization hits this massive, often totally misunderstood brick wall.
Regulatory review.
Yes. Regulatory review. It creates this bizarre period of organizational purgatory that sales leaders absolutely must understand.
And, more importantly, they have to learn how to exploit it.
So let's unpack that purgatory.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people assume that once the announcement is made, you just start having transition meetings, right?
Yeah, that's the instinct. You want to get to work.
But when two publicly traded companies announce a merger, or a massive public company acquires a significant private target, you enter the jurisdiction of the Hart-Scott-Rodino Act.
Right, the HSR Act.
And you have the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, or the Federal Trade Commission, stepping in to review the deal. And they aren't just rubber stamping a form.
No, absolutely not. Especially if you're in a complex horizontal deal.
Meaning the acquirer and the target directly compete in the same market.
Exactly. In those cases, regulators can issue what is known as a second request.
Okay, a second request. What does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, a second request is a vastly demanding document and data production requirement.
Like lawyers in a conference room with boxes of files demanding?
Oh, way beyond that now. Terabytes of emails and CRM logs. It shifts the initial 30-day waiting period into this prolonged investigation that can extend the regulatory review process by 6 months or even well over a year.
Wow, over a year.
Easily. And during this entire window, the companies are legally mandated to operate as entirely separate entities.
Ah, So this is the hold separate period.
Yes, and the rules governing the hold separate period are remarkably strict and entirely non-negotiable.
Which means you are essentially legally gagged.
Completely.
You cannot share pricing strategies with the acquirer. You cannot compare pipeline data to see who is working which accounts.
Right, you can't even run a customer overlap analysis to figure out your combined market share.
And you absolutely cannot do joint go-to-market planning.
No. Even if these people are technically going to be signing your paychecks in 6 months, sharing that information is a massive legal violation.
You have to maintain complete competitive independence.
Exactly. I mean, the intention behind the law is to prevent companies from operating as a monopoly before the merger is legally cleared.
Sure, if the government ultimately blocks the deal, they need to ensure both companies can continue to compete vigorously.
Right. But from an operational standpoint, it creates an environment of just profound paralysis.
I can completely understand why it feels paralyzing. I mean, think about it. If I'm a chief revenue officer and you're telling me I can't talk to my new counterparts about our pipelines or our customer overlap,
Yeah.
aren't we just sitting on our hands for a year?
That's how it feels to most people.
Like we're losing all the momentum of the announcement? My competitors are out there actively using our merger as a wedge to poach our clients.
Oh, they definitely are.
They're telling them, our product roadmap is dead, and I am legally restricted from even sitting in a room with my future boss to figure out a counter strategy. It just feels like forced organizational decay.
It absolutely feels that way, which makes the mindset shift of the most successful integration leaders so fascinating to watch.
How do they shift it? Because it sounds like a nightmare.
Well, they completely reframe this period. They recognize that this is not a pause.
Yeah.
This hold separate period is actually the absolute best, most undisturbed window you will ever have to clean your own house.
Clean your own house. I like that.
Yeah. You have to treat data quality not as a nice-to-have operational goal, but as a strict regulatory compliance function.
Oh, because of the regulators.
Exactly. Because when you're operating under a second request or just preparing for the inevitable integration, your data infrastructure is going to be interrogated at a molecular level.
So we're shifting from defensive paralysis to offensive preparation.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Let's look at what that actually means for, the person staring at their CRM dashboard on a Tuesday morning.
Right.
Because if the FTC or the DOJ issues a second request and demands your data, you cannot hand a federal regulator a spreadsheet where the numbers are essentially just vibes.
No, vibes will not hold up in federal court.
You have to know exactly what every single data point represents.
And it starts with building an ironclad data dictionary.
A data dictionary.
Yes.
Okay.
You need to document what every single field in your system means, what the valid values are, and the underlying business process that actually generates that data.
Give me an example. What's a field that gets messy?
Okay, let's look at a seemingly simple field, contract value.
Oh, yeah. That sounds simple enough.
Right. But in a sprawling, mature sales organization, contract value is almost never uniform.
That's true.
For your software team, it might mean annual contract value.
Okay.
But for the hardware division, it might represent total contract value over a 3-year term.
Oh, I see.
And for the professional services group, it might just be a sales rep's highly optimistic estimate of first-year billable hours.
So if you hand that blended, contradictory data set to a regulator, or frankly to the acquiring company's integration team on day one, it is a massive liability.
Massive. You are presenting a completely distorted view of your revenue engine.
So you utilize this legal purgatory to lock down those definitions.
Precisely. You build a comprehensive due diligence checklist. You anticipate the exact data the acquirer will inevitably demand the moment the deal officially closes.
And what's typically on that checklist? What are they asking for?
Well, when we look at the standard DFIN M&A checklists provided in the sources, the baseline demands are honestly staggering.
Really? How much data do they want?
They require 3 years of historical revenue cut intricately by customer, by specific product line, and by geographic region.
Wow, 3 full years.
Yeah. And they need billings, bookings, and the intricate revenue recognition support to back those numbers up.
So they want receipts for everything.
Exactly. They'll demand your historical sales pipeline velocity, your win rates against specific competitors, and a deep cohort-based churn analysis.
That is a ton of work. And it isn't just the raw data output they need, right? They need the logic governing the human behavior that generated that data.
Oh, absolutely. They need to understand how the machine actually works.
Which brings us to the most convoluted part of any sales organization, the compensation plans.
Yeah, compensation logic is frequently the most siloed, undocumented knowledge in an entire company.
It really is. It usually lives in one person's head or in a very fragile Excel macro.
Right, so you have to detail your commission plan mechanics in plain English?
Like, how do your sales performance incentive funds, your SPFs, actually trigger?
Yes. What are the exact thresholds for your accelerator tiers?
Or if a customer signs a massive contract but churns in month 3, how exactly do the clawbacks function against the rep's future commissions?
Exactly. You have to write this down in such a way that someone who has never worked at your company can understand the behavioral incentives instantly.
And the strategic advantage here is entirely about leverage, isn't it?
It's all about leverage.
Because if you spend this 6 to 12-month waiting period doing this glorious, unglamorous administrative cleanup, you're arming yourself.
You really are. You cannot effectively advocate for your team, your internal processes, or your headcount later in the integration if your baseline operational metrics are a total mess right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. If your data is pristine, when the integration finally starts, you negotiate from a position of absolute strength.
Exactly. You can prove your territory models work, you can prove your comp plans drive the right behavior.
But if your data is a disaster, you have no ground to stand on,
Right.
and your systems will simply be absorbed and overwritten by the acquiring company.
And that leverage becomes critical the moment the regulatory waiting period ends.
Because eventually, the deal officially closes.
Right. The legal barriers of the hold separate period dissolve.
And suddenly, the operational landscape shifts dramatically. A completely new species of corporate life populates your office and your strategy meetings.
Yeah, you transition from legal purgatory directly into the hands of the Integration Management Office, or IMO.
Ah, the IMO. And the IMO is almost never just internal staff, right?
Rarely. Especially if you're dealing with a large acquisition.
Like transactions in the $500 million to $2 billion range.
Exactly. In those deals, the involvement of the Big Four external consultants is a virtual guarantee.
So you are looking across the table at Deloitte, EY, PwC, or KPMG.
And they do not come cheap.
We are talking about engagements with fees running from $15 million to $50 million, scaling into the hundreds of millions for massive mega deals.
It's a huge expense.
It forces a very obvious question from the people on the ground. Why on earth is the executive team dropping $50 million on external consultants just to merge two companies they already own?
It's a fair question, but the reliance on the Big Four stems from a few very practical, albeit sometimes frustrating, organizational realities.
Okay, break that down first. Why bring them in?
Well, first, the corporate development team that scouted, evaluated, and structured the financial transaction, they are almost never the team that possesses the operational capability to actually execute it.
Right, the deal makers are not the operators.
Exactly. And furthermore, the acquirer's operational leadership simply does not have the sheer bandwidth required to run a massive, highly complex, multi-year integration while simultaneously hitting their normal quarterly revenue targets.
Because the business still has to run.
The business has to run. So the consultants bring an instant, massive influx of headcount.
Okay, so it's a labor thing.
Partly, they deploy legions of project managers, workstream coordinators, and subject matter experts across finance, human resources, IT, and sales operations.
So they bring an instant army, but more importantly, they bring political air cover.
Oh, the air cover's huge.
I look at these massive consulting engagements as incredibly expensive corporate shock absorbers.
That's a great way to put it.
Think about the internal politics of an integration. If an internal revenue operations leader from the acquiring company looks at the newly combined organization and suggests that half the legacy sales ops team needs to migrate to a new, highly painful CRM system.
Yeah, that leader immediately looks like they are protecting their turf, playing politics, and consolidating power.
Exactly. It creates massive internal friction and resentment.
But if an external partner from a Big Four firm, wearing a tailored suit and pointing to a $50 million proprietary framework, recommends that exact same painful migration.
The executive team accepts it. The target company accepts it.
Right. The consultant absorbs the organizational friction because they're perceived as an objective, data-driven third party.
So that dynamic of political air cover is very real and often necessary to break internal stalemates.
It is. However, this relationship between the internal operators and the external consultants is frequently fraught with dysfunction.
Oh, I'm sure it is. What goes wrong?
Well, the playbooks the consultants bring accumulated from hundreds of prior engagements. They create standardized templates and risk registers.
Which sounds good.
It does, but they also create massive vulnerabilities if applied blindly. The sources outline several critical failure modes that a sales leader must actively watch out for.
What's the biggest one?
The most prominent is the creation of a fiction plan.
A fiction plan. Okay, what does that look like?
So imagine you're looking at this beautifully formatted 200-slide integration playbook that the McKinsey or Deloitte team just produced in 6 weeks.
It sounds impressive.
It outlines every milestone, every synergy target, every operational pivot. It looks flawless on paper.
Right. On paper.
But you know your internal resources. You know your sales operations analysts are already working 50-hour winks just keeping the day-to-day business afloat.
Yeah, they're tapped out.
So if this master plan relies on your internal teams to execute the heavy lifting, if it assumes they have 20 hours a week of magical excess capacity to take on integration tasks, it is essentially a work of fiction. Because it will never be executed. The people required to do the work are already drowning.
Exactly. A pristine Gantt chart does not create more hours in the day.
Right, so the execution risk is almost entirely shifted onto the internal team, while the plan's authorship remains with the consultant.
Yep. And that friction ties directly into the second major failure mode, inadequate knowledge transfer.
Okay, why does the knowledge transfer fail?
It's driven by the fundamental commercial incentives of the consulting firm. Remember how they bill?
Time and materials.
Exactly. They operate on a time and materials basis. It is infinitely more profitable for the consultants to execute the complex new workflows and build the new system architectures themselves, rather than spending the painstaking hours required to teach your internal teams how to sustain them.
Oh, man. So they spend 2 years building an incredibly complex operational machine, and then the engagement ends.
The consultants roll off the project, and the institutional knowledge just vanishes with them. And you are left holding the keys to a highly customized, extremely fragile machine, and no one on your internal team knows how to fix it when it breaks.
Exactly. And because the consultant built it, when it inevitably does break, you have to bring them back in.
Which leads perfectly into the third failure mode, scope creep.
Yes, scope creep is inevitable if you're not careful.
Because a $10 million initial integration engagement is viewed by the consulting partner as merely an anchor relationship, right?
Exactly. Their goal is to expand that footprint with new strategic assessments, phase 2 optimizations, and change management modules.
It is an ecosystem designed to expand.
Yes. So surviving this dynamic and actually extracting value from it requires you to be an exceptionally strong, informed client.
Okay, so how do you do that? How do you manage them effectively?
Well, passive reception of deliverables is an operational death sentence. You must take proactive control of the engagement.
Step 1.
First, you must designate a highly competent internal owner for every single sales workstream.
Okay. Even if the consultants are doing the actual work.
Even if the consultant is currently doing the heavy lifting, your internal person must be attached to them at the hip. They need to participate in the architectural decisions and build the knowledge base alongside them.
So that when a consultant eventually leaves, your team can run the process independently.
Exactly. And you also have to be willing to aggressively challenge their deliverables when they do not map to your reality.
Right, because if the consultant hands you a generic framework, you cannot just throw your hands up and complain to your boss that it's useless.
No, complaining is not a strategy. You have to provide highly specific, productive pushback.
Like what? What does good pushback sound like?
You have to say something like, this coverage framework assumes a single segment go-to-market motion, but our reality is that we have 3 distinct segments: enterprise, mid-market, and velocity, with entirely different sales cycles and support models.
We need to adapt this template to account for that complexity.
Yes. Consultants are generally very responsive to specific, well-reasoned feedback because their ultimate goal is client satisfaction.
But you have to force them off their boilerplate templates.
You do. And if we connect this to the overarching goal of the integration, you have to hold them ruthlessly accountable to value.
Meaning what, exactly?
A $25 million consulting engagement must produce $25 million in measurable, quantifiable value.
That means actual cost synergies realized, revenue milestones significantly accelerated, or catastrophic risks entirely mitigated.
Exactly. If they are merely providing a shared project management portal, tracking spreadsheets and weekly status decks, they are functioning as highly overpaid administrators, not strategic partners.
Okay, so the IMO's running. The consultants have justified their fees by handing us a massive validated organizational chart, and the strategy is set.
Right.
But that beautiful organizational chart is completely useless until you figure out where those newly mapped salespeople are actually going to log in to do their jobs on Monday morning.
Yeah, that's where the real fight begins.
Which brings us to the most vicious, high-stakes turf war of any M&A, the battle of the systems.
The tech wars.
The technology stack dictates the entire future of how the combined company sells. And yet, the most counterintuitive part of this phase for a sales leader is realizing that the lifeblood of the sales team is not the first priority.
No, it's not. The ERP goes first.
And I can hear the collective groan of every sales operations person listening right now.
Oh, I'm sure they're groaning. It's a reality that consistently frustrates revenue leaders. Enterprise resource planning software, the core accounting, supply chain, and financial ledger system takes absolute precedence.
But why on earth are we talking about the general ledger? Like, let the finance team worry about the accounting software. We have to worry about the pipeline, the forecasting, the customer relationships.
It is a very natural defensive reaction, but the sources we're analyzing argue vehemently that it is a catastrophic mistake for sales operations to ignore the ERP consolidation decision.
Why is it a mistake?
You have to understand what actually lives at the ERP layer. It is not just static accounting. Commission calculation and payout, complex revenue recognition under ASC 606, order management, inventory allocation, and headcount cost management. It all resides within the ERP.
Ah, I see.
Think about the life cycle of revenue. You trace the journey of a dollar. An opportunity in your CRM is successfully negotiated and becomes a quote.
Right.
That quote is signed and becomes an order. But that order only becomes a legally binding, recognizable invoice once it hits the ERP.
And if we haven't consolidated the ERPs yet because finance is taking their time, we have a fragmented backend.
Exactly.
We have two entirely different paths from a signed contract to cash actually hitting the bank account.
Which creates a massive operational nightmare. If you are running two different ERPs, you are running two separate commission expense accounts with entirely different accrual methodologies.
Oh, wow. That sounds messy.
It is. When external auditors come in and demand a consolidated commission expense figure to close the quarter, someone on your operations team is manually extracting data from both systems.
Dumping it into a massive Excel spreadsheet.
Yep. And attempting to aggregate it by hand. In a publicly traded company, manual aggregation of highly sensitive financial data, like commission accounting, is a major audit exposure.
Because it is highly prone to human error.
Yes, and it slows down the entire financial close process.
So finance drives the ERP consolidation because they have a legal fiduciary duty to close the books accurately.
Right. And sales operations needs a seat at that table, not to dictate the accounting rules, but to ensure they thoroughly understand how the order-to-cash workflow is going to change.
And how it will impact rep compensation.
Exactly.
But once that financial foundation is somewhat stable, the existential battle for the revenue team truly begins.
The CRM survival question.
Right. Whoever controls the surviving customer relationship management system controls the data model, the reporting logic, and the entire go-to-market motion for the combined enterprise.
It is the highest stakes technology decision for the revenue engine. And the harsh reality is that in the vast majority of cases, the acquirer's CRM wins.
Really. Almost always.
Almost always. And it frequently wins not because it is technologically superior, but due to sunk cost inertia.
Makes sense. The acquiring company has likely already spent tens of millions of dollars over the last decade customizing their instance.
Building proprietary integrations and training their massive workforce on its quirks. They default to keeping it simply because the switching costs appear too high.
But even if the target company's CRM is objectively better, like, what if the target company has a much more mature product taxonomy, a cleaner quoting process, or a far superior opportunity stage definitions?
The acquire system still usually wins.
That's tough to swallow.
It is, which is exactly why sales operations must push for deep visibility early in the process. If you are on the target side, you have to aggressively advocate for your institutional knowledge before the architectural decisions are locked.
You have to demonstrate why your data model is superior for specific product lines.
Right. But regardless of which system ultimately survives, there is a crucial, non-negotiable step that must occur before you merge a single byte of data.
And what's that?
You must harmonize your definitions.
Harmonizing definitions. I mean, this sounds a bit academic, but let's look at the mechanical disaster that happens if you skip it.
That's a disaster.
Let's take a foundational concept. The sales qualified lead or SQL.
Okay, perfect example.
Imagine company A defines in SQL as literally any inbound demo request. The moment a prospect fills out a form on the website, they are tagged as in SQL.
Right, so it's a high-velocity, high-volume motion.
Exactly. But Company B is an enterprise motion. They are much more rigorous. They do not label anything in SQL until an account executive has completed a full 45-minute discovery call, identified the decision maker, and explicitly confirmed a budget.
So if you simply jam both of those databases into one surviving CRM without harmonizing that definition,
You create absolute garbage data.
you generate blended confusion. You cannot run a unified pipeline report for the executive team because in SQL in the legacy Company A system represents maybe a 5% statistical chance to close.
While in SQL from legacy Company B represents a 40% chance to close.
Exactly. The reporting becomes entirely meaningless.
So before you touch the technology, before you map a single field, you have to sit down in a room and agree on exactly what closed won means.
You must define the strict entrance and exit criteria for every single stage of the sales funnel.
You have to agree on the language before you build the library.
Exactly.
But even when you do agree on definitions, how do you actually execute the migration? Because there is a specific failure mode here that teams fall into when they try to rush this process.
Right. Known as lift and shift.
Lift and shift.
Yeah, lift and shift is arguably the most common and most destructive CRM integration disaster.
Really? How does it happen?
It occurs when an IT or operations team takes the acquiring company's CRM, exports the target company's data, imports it directly into the acquirer's system, and declares the integration complete.
I mean, it sounds incredibly efficient. Why is that a disaster?
Because you aren't actually integrating anything, you are merely stitching two overlapping, often contradictory data models together.
Oh, I see.
You end up with the acquiring company's account hierarchy, their specific field labels, and their validation rules awkwardly draped over the target company's historical data.
Which was never designed to fit that structure.
Exactly. It creates a Frankenstein system that is virtually unnavigable for the sales reps.
So what's the alternative?
The alternative and the only sustainable path is migrating to the target state.
Meaning you don't just migrate to the winning system, you use the merger as an executive-mandated excuse to redesign the data model for how the combined business will actually sell in the future.
Exactly. You define a completely unified territory structure first. You define the combined product catalog and pricing logic.
That makes total sense.
And crucially, before any data moves, you must deduplicate accounts. This is known as customer master reconciliation.
Because both legacy CRMs will inevitably have accounts representing the exact same real-world customer.
Right.
Like Company A's system has IBM, Company B's system has International Business Machines, and a rogue rep created IBM Corp just to get around a validation rule.
Yes. And if you do not execute a rigorous deduplication process, which often requires complex, fuzzy matching algorithms and manual review before migrating.
You build compounding errors into every downstream system.
Exactly. You will have two different sales reps from the same combined company calling on the same customer completely unaware of each other.
Ouch.
You have to build the architectural foundation of the house properly before you move the furniture in.
But building a house properly takes time.
Yeah.
And chief revenue officers are notoriously pathologically impatient.
Oh, definitely.
I can just hear a CRO pounding the table demanding, I want consolidated dashboards on day one. I want to see the combined pipeline the morning the deal officially closes.
This is where the operations leader has to inject a severe dose of reality.
What's the reality?
Rebuilding true business intelligence and integrated reporting infrastructure typically takes 6 to 12 months after the CRM and the ERP are completely stable.
Wait, after?
Yes, after. The total timeline from the deal closing to achieving a fully integrated, automated reporting infrastructure for a complex acquisition is commonly 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years. That is a long time.
Executive teams and corporate boards consistently underestimate this timeline.
I bet.
The integration planning documents produced by the deal team that promise full system integration in 18 months are typically optimistic by a factor of 2.
So for the sales operations professional, the practical daily reality is that you will be operating in a highly transitional, messy state for much longer than anyone planned.
Yep. Your territory model might be live in one system while your pipeline forecasting is happening in another, and your commission calculations are pulling from a third, entirely separate database.
3 to 4 years of operating in a transitional state is a staggering operational burden. It is a marathon of technical debt.
It really is.
But here is the crux of the issue. Systems don't actually sell the product. People do. So while IT, finance, and sales operations are fighting a 4-year grinding war over data hierarchies and API integrations, there is a massive, highly volatile human element happening simultaneously.
Which brings us to the actual sales teams and the customers they serve.
Right.
Combining the human element of the sales functions is arguably the most delicate and high-risk part of the entire M&A process.
More than the IT stuff.
Oh, yeah. In fact, McKinsey's research notes that almost 1/3 of seasoned integration professionals call combining the sales functions the absolute greatest integration challenge they face.
Wow.
It ranks higher in difficulty than IT consolidation, higher than supply chain integration, and higher than cultural alignment.
Why is it so uniquely difficult? I mean, salespeople are inherently adaptable, aren't they? They're used to new products, new territories, new quotas.
They are adaptable to market conditions, yes, but salespeople and the customers they manage absolutely despise organizational ambiguity. Think about the psychological state of a sales rep the moment a merger is announced. Their entire livelihood is based on leverage and predictability.
Right. And immediately, they are consumed by existential questions.
Exactly, like, what happens to my specific territory? Am I going to lose my top 3 accounts to a rep from the acquiring company?
Will my quota be doubled to justify the deal synergies? Will my carefully negotiated compensation plan be gutted?
Or am I going to be reporting to a new manager from the other company who doesn't understand my market or respect my historical performance?
And while the internal revenue team is spiraling into a panic, the customers are experiencing the exact same anxiety.
They really are.
The people buying the software or the hardware are wondering, is the product line I just invested millions in going to be sunsetted by the new parent company?
Will my dedicated, highly responsive account manager get fired and replaced by a generic support queue?
And this ambiguity is not just an internal morale issue, it is a massive competitive vulnerability.
Oh, competitors will actively and aggressively exploit this fear. Well, the day your merger is announced, your competitors' SDRs are updating their talk track.
Oh, man. They're going on the attack.
Oh, yeah. They will swoop in to poach your star salespeople by offering them guaranteed stability, sign-on bonuses, and protected territories.
Wow. And simultaneously, they will run highly targeted campaigns against your anxious customers, utilizing FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yes, FUD. They will suggest that the merged company is going to be far too distracted by internal integration, chaos, system outages, and political infighting to support their clients properly.
Ambiguity is the fundamental enemy of post-merger revenue retention.
Exactly.
So how do we fight the FUD? If ambiguity is the enemy, how does a revenue leader systematically dismantle it?
The strategies we found point to a few essential steps. The first and most critical being over-communicate, specifically with your customers.
Because the natural corporate instinct during an integration is to hide the mess, right?
Oh, definitely. Companies try to shield their customers from the internal merger activities. They think, we shouldn't bother them until we have all the answers and a perfectly polished go-to-market message.
But that instinct is entirely wrong. Silence breeds suspicion. You must proactively involve the customers in the transition.
Consider the networking equipment company case study highlighted in the research.
Okay, what did they do?
Well, their customers were terrified about the post-merger product roadmap. Competitors were actively whispering that certain key legacy product lines were going to be killed off to cut costs.
Ouch. That's a strong FUD tactic.
It is. But instead of waiting for the systems to integrate, the company developed an integrated, highly detailed product roadmap before the deal even closed.
And they proactively shared it with their top-tier clients to quiet those concerns.
Exactly. You have to commit to a strict timeline for answering questions, even if you have to look a customer or a sales rep in the eye and honestly say, we do not know the exact territory mapping yet, but we commit to having a definitive, finalized answer for you by November 15th.
Transparency over perfection.
Yeah.
You control the narrative by admitting what you don't know, but proving you have a plan to figure it out.
Right.
Okay, so the second critical step is building sales momentum, specifically focusing on what integration experts call the 100-day window.
Yes, the 100-day window. The strategy here is to relentlessly pursue quick wins.
Quick wins, like what?
You target specific, highly complementary products that can be easily cross-sold to both historical customer bases immediately.
Proving to the sales force that the new combined entity is actually viable and that they can make money here.
Generating those early wins is essential for retention. You want the sales force to get a taste of the promised synergies so they feel confident in the deal's strategic soundness.
I understand the psychology, but I have to play devil's advocate mechanically here.
Okay, go for it.
We just established in excruciating detail that integrating the back office systems, the ERP, the CRM, the quoting engines, takes 3 to 4 years. How on earth are we supposed to execute quick cross-sell wins in the first 100 days if the IT infrastructure is a fragmented disaster and we can't even process a joint order across the 2 legacy systems?
That contradiction is the defining challenge of the 100-day window.
So how do you do it?
To achieve those quick wins, operations teams must accept highly inefficient, temporary, plug-and-play solutions. You have to utilize manual workarounds.
So you are effectively duct taping the revenue engine together.
Exactly. Duct tape. This might mean building a temporary standalone web portal for cross-sell registrations.
Or it might mean using a highly monitored shared spreadsheet for cross-sell deal approvals that bypasses the CRM entirely.
Right. The overarching goal is to completely shield the frontline sales rep from the back-end operational chaos.
You must ensure they can enter joint orders, secure pricing approvals, and, most importantly, get paid their commissions on those cross-sells immediately.
You build a fragile, temporary bridge to buy the IT and finance teams the 3 years they need to build the permanent highway.
You absorb the chaos so the reps don't have to.
Exactly.
While you are doing that, the third step is securing the underlying talent. And this means looking far beyond just the quota-carrying sales reps.
Right, because it's very easy during a merger to pull a spreadsheet of revenue numbers, rank the reps by attainment, and decide who stays and who goes based purely on historical quota.
But the best integrators look for what we call the glue of the organization.
Yes. The glue personnel are the unsung heroes of the revenue engine.
Who are they?
They often sit in deal desk, revenue operations, legal, or finance. These are the critical support staff who actually know how the machine functions in reality versus how it is documented on paper.
They know the obscure technical workarounds. They know exactly who to call in the legal department to get a non-standard order approved at 4:00 p.m. on the last day of the quarter.
Exactly. And if you focus only on retaining the high-performing sales reps, but you inadvertently lay off or alienate the glue people because they don't carry a direct revenue quota.
Those star reps will suddenly find they cannot get a single deal pushed across the finish line.
Yes. Frustration will peak, and your top talent will leave anyway. Retaining the glue is non-negotiable.
You have to protect the mechanics, not just the pilots.
That's right.
The final strategic step in merging the humans is reviewing the customer portfolio. A merger is a remarkably rare, highly strategic opportunity to execute the ultimate, it's not you, it's the merger breakup text to a bad client.
It really is. It provides the organizational cover to shed highly unprofitable customers.
Because normally, sales organizations are structurally incentivized to retain every single dollar of revenue, regardless of the cost to serve, right?
Oh, yeah. But when you execute a deep integration analysis, you examine the true, fully loaded cost of serving historical accounts.
Factoring in dedicated support activities, excessive custom engineering demands, and disproportionate rep time.
Right. And you frequently uncover legacy customers who demand absolute top-tier service but offer terrible margins.
And the merger provides the perfect, unassailable excuse to reallocate resources aggressively away from them or to force a hard renegotiation of their terms under the guise of new corporate policies.
Exactly.
To see how all these human elements, the ambiguity, the speed, the cultural friction, actually play out in reality, the sources provided a fantastic, highly detailed case study about a medical device company.
Yeah, that case study is wild. They were faced with integrating 300 sales reps who had heavily overlapping territories.
And the complexity of that integration was compounded by a severe cultural clash, right?
Severe. You had one legacy company that was highly entrepreneurial, brash, aggressive, where reps had near total leeway to structure deals however they saw fit to win the business.
So it was like a typical startup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the acquiring company, conversely, was highly measured, heavily corporate, with strict pricing oversight and rigid compliance protocols.
The classic startup versus incumbent dynamic. The friction there is usually fatal. How did they actually handle it without losing half the team?
Well, they recognized that ambiguity was their greatest threat, so they set an incredibly aggressive, almost unreasonable timeline.
How aggressive?
They mandated a single unified face to the customer within 8 weeks of the deal closing.
8 weeks? That's insane.
However, to achieve this legally, they had to navigate the hold separate rules we discussed earlier.
Right, because regular sales operations personnel cannot legally view the competitor's pipeline or territory structures structures before the deal closes.
Exactly. So they utilize what are known as clean teams.
Clean teams are fascinating. Let's explain how they actually operate mechanically.
A clean team is a highly restricted group. They are either independent third-party consultants or deeply isolated internal employees who sign incredibly strict non-disclosure agreements.
Okay.
Crucially, they are legally permitted to view the highly confidential, unmasked data of both companies before the deal officially closes.
Wait, really? But they can't talk to anyone else.
Right. They operate in total isolation from the day-to-day business. While the rest of the company was waiting in legal purgatory, this clean team analyzed the combined data.
Modeled the synergies,
Yeah.
and meticulously mapped out the entirely new territory structure and sales rep deployment strategy in absolute secret.
Yes, an absolute secret.
So the literal moment the ink was dry on the legal closing documents, the blueprint was completely ready to deploy.
Precisely. Within 3 weeks of the official close, they rolled out the newly unified compensation and benefit policies.
Wow.
Within another 2 weeks, the full, comprehensive territory deployment was announced to the entire field.
So by ripping the Band-Aid off that quickly, they effectively closed the ambiguity window.
Exactly. Reps simply didn't have the time to interview with competitors because they almost immediately knew their new territory, their new manager, and exactly how their new compensation plan worked.
They achieved their 8-week goal, stabilized the workforce, and actually managed to accelerate revenue growth during the transition.
Which is an incredible feat.
That is the absolute dream scenario for an integration. It is beautifully executed. But let's bring this back down to earth for a minute.
Okay, let's get grounded.
Because while those grand strategies of clean teams, cultural alignment, and executive steering committees are happening in the boardroom, the day-to-day reality for the typical sales operations listener is significantly grittier.
Oh, much grittier.
While the executives are patting themselves on the back for a successful close, the operations teams are descending into phase 5.
The messy middle.
The messy middle. It's exactly where high-level strategy collides violently with granular operational reality.
Yeah.
As the grand systems architectures are being debated by IT, sales operations is engaged in a relentless daily triage of immediate crises.
And the most potent, volatile crisis generator is always compensation.
Always.
We touched on this earlier, but we need to look at the anatomy of what the sources call the commission nightmare. Let's walk through the actual math and mechanics of this.
Okay, lay it out. Imagine an acquisition officially closes mid-year, say, in late October. The acquiring company runs on a standard calendar fiscal year, ending in December.
Right?
And they want to roll all the newly acquired reps onto their standardized compensation plan, starting fresh on January 1st.
Which leaves you with a 2-month stub period for November and December.
Exactly. And administering a stub period is incredibly complex and fraught with peril.
Oh, it's awful.
What do you do with a legacy sales rep who is just $10,000 away from hitting a massive annual accelerator tier under their old plan? Do you honor it?
Do you prorate the accelerator target based on the 10-month performance?
Right. What happens to a specific SPIF?
Right.
A temporary incentive that was supposed to run continuously through the end of December to move a legacy product. Do you cancel it?
And the unglamorous reality of sales ops in M&A is an analyst, let's call her Sarah, sitting alone at 9:00 p.m. with a monstrous, fragile Excel spreadsheet.
Yes. She is manually managing 200 individual compensation exceptions.
She is manually calculating prorated accelerators to ensure that a top-performing rep doesn't quit out of pure frustration because their paycheck is light.
All while simultaneously trying to map Salesforce fields for the impending IT integration.
It is profoundly thankless, invisible work that literally keeps the company afloat.
And while the operations team is dealing with that mechanical chaos, they're also navigating the cultural and political clash of reporting structures and headcount consolidation.
We really have to be brutally honest about how these dynamics resolve. The sources point to a very harsh truth regarding who survives an integration.
The harsh truth being that the acquirer's structure almost always wins.
Almost always.
Even if the deal is billed to the press as a merger of equals, one side ultimately takes the wheel.
Right. The acquirer's chief revenue officer retains power and sets the overarching go-to-market motion.
Their preferred key performance indicators become the new gold standard for the entire enterprise.
Which means if you are a sales operations individual contributor or a mid-level manager from the target company, your survival depends entirely on adaptation.
Clinging to the phrase, well, this is how we used to do things, makes you instantly redundant.
Yes. Survival requires one of two things.
What are they?
Either. You must possess incredibly deep, irreplaceable knowledge of the legacy book of business, meaning, all the historical deal structures, the product quirks, the specific customer billing data that the acquirer desperately needs to understand.
Or R, you must demonstrate the ability to adapt instantly to the acquirer's tooling and reporting frameworks. This creates a really critical mandate for the sales operations leader. You are fighting a war on two fronts.
You really are.
You have to protect the base business from collapsing, but you also have to protect your best people from being marginalized.
Because companies often become so entirely blinded by the pursuit of executive synergy targets and integration milestones that they completely fail to protect the day-to-day operations.
The base business begins to decay simply because everyone is looking inward at the integration rather than outward at the market.
Exactly.
So what is the tactical move for a leader caught in that dynamic?
A smart strategic sales operations leader will identify their most resilient, technically strong people and explicitly pull them out of the day-to-day triage.
Okay, pull them out and put them where?
You assign them directly to the integration work streams, but you give them a very specific mandate. Their job is to represent the vital institutional knowledge of the target company.
Their job is to ensure the new combined data models actually account for your unique products and sales motions.
Crucially, their job is not to defend the legacy status quo.
That is such a vital mindset shift.
It's the only way to survive.
The integration is happening. The incoming tide cannot be stopped. You cannot stand on the beach and try to push the water back. Your goal is to focus all your energy on building a better boat.
Build a better boat. I love that.
You are trying to ensure the integration goes well and accounts for your reality. Rather than fighting a territorial battle, you have essentially already lost the moment the acquisition was signed.
That's exactly right.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. Let's start bringing this entire journey home.
Sounds good.
We have mapped out the sheer operational marathon of a revenue engine navigating an M&A. We started by looking at the day zero shock and the bizarre legal purgatory of the hold separate period.
We learned that you have to treat data quality like a regulatory compliance function, cleaning your house and defining your metrics.
Because federal regulators, and eventually your new bosses, are going to be looking over your shoulder.
Then we explore the arrival of the Integration Management Office and the Big Four consultants.
Right? We examine the necessity of understanding their commercial incentives, the time and materials billing that drives them,
and how to be a highly demanding, informed client who insists on measurable, quantifiable value rather than simply accepting a 200-slide fiction plan that your internal team has no capacity to execute.
We waded deep into the tech wars, realizing the counterintuitive truth that finance's need to consolidate the ERP and protect the audit trail usually dictates the timeline.
We discuss how sales operations must fight for a CRM migration that completely redesigns the data model for the future state.
Ruthlessly harmonizing definitions and deduplicating accounts, rather than settling for a lazy, disastrous lift-and-shift approach.
We highlighted the extreme existential danger of ambiguity when merging the human elements.
We looked at how competitors exploit FUD and how over-communicating with customers, retaining the vital glue personnel, and utilizing duct-taped manual workarounds are absolutely essential to maintaining revenue momentum in those critical first 100 days.
And finally, we acknowledge the brutal, unglamorous reality of the messy middle.
The manual commission spreadsheets, the administrative nightmare of stub periods, and the harsh truth that the acquirer's culture and tooling will inevitably dominate.
It is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes 3 to 4 years, not 18 months.
So as a final thought from your side, what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
Well, as an overarching thought from the analytical side, I want to remind the listener to recognize their unique position in this ecosystem.
Which is what?
Sales operations typically absorbs a vastly disproportionate amount of the hidden integration costs and the resulting operational pain.
Why is that?
Because you sit at the precise, volatile intersection of finance, IT, human resources, and sales.
That's true.
You are in the finance workstream advocating for commission accuracy. You are in the IT workstream fighting for CRM architecture.
You are in the HR workstream mapping quota headcount.
And you are in the sales workstream because the frontline reps are constantly demanding to know when the chaos will end.
You are literally in every room.
You must expect to operate in a highly transitional state much longer than anyone planned. Protect your team from burnout by establishing sustainable rhythms because you are central to every single facet of the transition.
That is the sobering, unvarnished reality.
It is.
But I want to leave you with a slightly different perspective. A provocative thought to chew on as you go back to your complex spreadsheets, your CRM dashboards, and your endless integration steering committee meetings.
I'm intrigued.
We started this deep dive by comparing a corporate M&A to swapping out the engine of a commercial airliner while it's flying at 30,000 feet.
Right.
It is incredibly painful, it is fraught with risk, and it is exhausting. But think about what a massive merger actually represents from an operational standpoint.
Okay.
It is a remarkably rare, executive-mandated, fully funded disruption.
Oh, that's a good point.
Instead of merely viewing this integration as an exhausting trial, you simply have to survive. What if you viewed this M&A as the ultimate reset button?
A reset button.
Think about it. If you are like every other operations professional on Earth, for years you have probably been complaining about your legacy technical debt.
Oh, for sure.
You have hated your convoluted, overly complex territory models. You have despised your fragmented data hierarchies, your manual reporting workarounds, and your wildly inconsistent commission plans.
But you never had the budgetary resources, the IT bandwidth, or the executive air cover to actually tear them down and fix them.
Exactly. But now suddenly, because of this transaction, you do.
Wow. Yeah, you do.
What if you use the undeniable momentum of this integration, the chaos of the transition, and the deep pockets of the acquiring company to finally build the unified, streamlined, highly efficient revenue engine you've always dreamed of having?
I mean, the disruption is happening whether you like it or not.
Exactly. The old machine is being dismantled. You might as well use this opportunity to build a machine that actually works.
That is an amazing perspective.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.